In this episode, we're examining 5 of the dumbest shark cage diving encounters that ended in fatalities. From a couple who climbed out of their cage for better photos, to an influencer who leaned too far for viral footage. But first, we begin with a reckless couple's desire for the perfect shot, leading them to make a decision that no amount of warning could prevent. It was November 3rd, 2016, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the South African coast, where Emma Parker and Daniel Reed stood inside a rusted cage operated by an unlicensed dive company, about to climb out for better photos despite the operator's warnings that people had died doing exactly what they were planning. Emma Parker, 29, and Daniel Reed, 31, were a thrill-seeking couple from Manchester, England, who had built their relationship around adrenaline. They'd met 3 years earlier at a rock climbing gym and bonded over a shared contempt for safety regulations: skydiving in Thailand, cave diving in Mexico, free climbing in Norway. Their social media accounts were filled with photos that made their friends nervous and their families furious. Emma worked as a freelance graphic designer. Daniel was a personal trainer who had recently quit his gym position to focus on fitness influencing. Both had adopted a philosophy they repeated often, that life was meant to be lived at the edge. Friends later told investigators that the couple had a pattern of one-upping each other, each dare leading to a more reckless response. This South African trip was meant to be their most extreme adventure yet. They'd specifically sought out cage diving operators who promised closer encounters, eventually finding an unlicensed outfit operating from a small fishing village. The company had no website, no insurance, and no permits. The operator ran trips from a 30-foot boat with a homemade cage welded together from salvaged materials. The cage bars were spaced wider than regulation, roughly 10 inches apart, and the welds showed visible rust and stress fractures. The morning of the dive, the operator had given a brief safety talk that Emma and Daniel largely ignored. He'd mentioned staying inside the cage and absolutely not exiting under any circumstances. Emma had laughed and asked what the point was if they couldn't get close. Daniel had already been planning the shot he wanted, both of them outside the cage with a great white in the background. The cage was lowered into the water around 9:30 a.m., with Emma and Daniel as the only divers. The water was murky, visibility perhaps 15 feet, with a strong current pulling at the cage. The operator began chumming the water, dumping buckets of fish blood and guts to attract sharks. Within 20 minutes, the first dorsal fin appeared, cutting through the surface roughly 40 feet away. Great white sharks are apex predators that can reach lengths of up to 20 feet and weigh over 5,000 pounds. Their bite force measures approximately 4,000 pounds per square inch, powerful enough to crush bone and tear through muscle with a single snap. Their teeth, arranged in multiple rows and constantly replaced throughout their lives, are serrated like steak knives, designed to grip and saw through flesh. The shark circled the cage twice, a massive female estimated at 16 feet long. Emma and Daniel were already climbing out, ignoring the operator's shouts from the boat. Daniel went first, pulling himself up and over the top edge of the cage, then positioning himself on the outside, gripping the bars with both hands. Emma followed, maneuvering to the opposite side. Both were now fully exposed in the open water, their bodies pressed against the cage exterior, legs dangling below. The shark circled without urgency, the same lazy arcs it had been making since it appeared. There was no visible change in its behavior when they climbed outside. No acceleration, no focused approach. It simply continued circling, indifferent, its black eye passing over them each time it came around. Daniel shifted position to get a better angle, and his left hand slipped on the wet metal. His body slid down the cage exterior, legs kicking instinctively to regain purchase. He never saw it come. The shark was mid-arc when it turned upward without warning. No charge, no telegraphed approach. One moment it was completing its pass, the next its jaws were open and driving upward into Daniel's lower body. The bite was over in under a second. A single catastrophic clamp and lateral head shake, the same mechanics it used on seal carcasses. Then it descended, unhurried, and was gone into the murk. Daniel's femoral artery was severed. At that depth, with that vessel open, he had perhaps 2 minutes of meaningful consciousness. He didn't scream. His grip simply failed, and he began to sink. Emma grabbed him, got her arm around his torso, and pulled. She didn't register the pain in her left side yet, the cold water and adrenaline masking what the shark's dorsal fin had done during the strike. A deep gash along her ribcage as it drove past her to reach Daniel. She held him for a few seconds, both of them drifting with the current. But his weight was working against her and she had no footing, nothing to brace against. He slipped from her grip slowly, not all at once, his body turning as the current took him, and then he was gone, into the dark below. The shark did not return. Emma surfaced alone. The operator pulled her over the side of the boat. She was unresponsive by the time she cleared the water, her breathing shallow and wet, blood soaking through her wetsuit from the wound she hadn't known she had. Emergency responders arrived 38 minutes after the initial call. Emma was airlifted to a trauma center in Cape Town, where surgeons worked for 6 hours to repair the damage. She survived the initial surgery but developed sepsis from the massive contamination of the wounds. Infection spread rapidly through her bloodstream, despite aggressive antibiotic treatment. She died 4 days later, her organs shutting down one by one. Daniel's body was recovered 2 days after the attack, found washed up on a beach 8 miles down the coast. The coroner's report noted massive traumatic amputation of the right leg, with complete severance of the femoral artery. As the unlicensed cage diving operation was dismantled on the South African coast, thousands of miles away in Australian waters, a social media influencer was preparing for her own cage dive, obsessed with capturing viral footage, completely unaware that leaning too far outside the cage would cost her everything. It was February 19th, 2017, and the afternoon sun beat down on the Great Barrier Reef, where Rachel Summers leaned further and further outside the cage with her camera extended, filming herself despite the dive master's repeated hand signals to get back inside, chasing the perfect angle for a video that would never be posted. Rachel was a 26-year-old social media influencer from Sydney, Australia, who had built a following of 83,000 subscribers on YouTube through travel vlogs and adventure content. Her channel featured her parasailing in Bali, swimming with whale sharks in the Philippines, and hiking active volcanoes in Indonesia. Each video was carefully edited with dramatic music and captions emphasizing how fearless she was. Behind that was a different reality. Rachel had become obsessed with engagement metrics, her growth plateauing, and she needed something that would break through the algorithm. The cage dive had been planned specifically for that purpose, at a site known for tiger shark activity, with the cage to herself so nothing would interrupt the shot. The dive master, a woman named Claire with 11 years of experience, had been explicit during the pre-dive briefing. Stay inside the cage at all times. Keep your body centered, away from the bars. Do not extend cameras or limbs outside the cage perimeter. Rachel had nodded along, but Claire noticed she wasn't making eye contact. Her attention focused on adjusting her camera settings. The cage descended into clear water at 1:45 p.m., visibility extending nearly 50 feet. Rachel immediately began filming, holding her camera at arm's length to capture herself with the ocean background. Within 10 minutes, the first tiger shark appeared, a large female estimated at 13 feet long, her distinctive stripes visible even at a distance. Tiger sharks are among the ocean's most dangerous predators, responsible for the second highest number of attacks on humans after great whites. They can reach lengths of 16 feet and weigh up to 2,000 pounds. Unlike great whites, which are relatively selective feeders, tiger sharks are notorious for eating almost anything. Their teeth are uniquely shaped with serrated edges and a distinctive notch, designed to saw through tough materials like sea turtle shells. The shark circled the cage slowly. Rachel tracked her with the camera, filming continuously. Claire signaled for Rachel to stay centered, but Rachel was already moving toward the bars, trying to get a better angle. Rachel wanted a shot of herself with the shark directly behind her in the frame. To get it, she needed to position the camera outside the cage while keeping herself in view. She moved to the corner, braced her feet against the cage floor, and extended her right arm through the bars, holding the camera at full extension. Her upper body pressed against the bars, her shoulder and part of her torso now protruding slightly outside the cage perimeter. Claire immediately swam down and grabbed Rachel's arm, pulling it back inside. Rachel jerked away, annoyed, and repositioned herself. She extended the camera again, this time leaning even further to get the angle she wanted. Her head and right shoulder were now outside the cage. The tiger shark had completed another circle and was now approaching directly. Rachel saw her coming and held the position, wanting the shark in the shot. The animal's head turned slightly, her eye fixing on Rachel's exposed upper body. The shark's mouth opened slightly, her jaw extending forward in the characteristic feeding posture. Claire lunged for Rachel again, but it was too late. The shark accelerated and her jaws clamped down on Rachel's extended right arm, just below the shoulder. The teeth cut through wetsuit and flesh with horrifying efficiency, the shark's head thrashing side to side, serrated edges grinding against bone. Rachel's regulator flew from her mouth. The shark pulled, dragging Rachel forward, her left hand gripping the bars until the force overwhelmed her. Her torso was halfway outside the cage when the shark released and descended. Claire pulled Rachel back inside. The damage was catastrophic. Her right arm nearly severed at the shoulder, her chest and upper body torn open. Rachel's body was limp, unresponsive. The cage was hauled up immediately, breaking the surface at 2:17 p.m. The crew pulled Rachel onto the boat and began CPR, but there was no pulse, no breathing, no response. Rachel was pronounced dead at the scene when paramedics arrived 25 minutes later. The coroner's report listed cause of death as massive traumatic injury to the right shoulder and upper chest, with severing of the subclavian artery, resulting in rapid exsanguination. Time of death was estimated at less than 2 minutes after the initial bite. As Rachel's family mourned in Australia, across the ocean in Mexico, a professional photographer was preparing for his own cage dive, convinced his experience and skill made him immune to the rules that applied to ordinary tourists, about to discover that overconfidence has only one outcome. It was August 12, 2015, and the crystal-clear waters off Guadalupe Island shimmered in the midday sun, where Mark Turner had just unclipped his safety tether inside the cage, ignoring the dive master's frantic signals, determined to get a close-up shot that would define his career. Mark Turner, 34, was a professional underwater photographer from San Diego, California, who had built a reputation shooting marine life for nature magazines and documentary productions. He'd been diving for 12 years, had logged over 400 dives, and had photographed sharks on at least 30 separate occasions. Colleagues later told investigators that he had a habit of dismissing safety protocols as unnecessary for someone with his skill level. His attitude was that rules were written for amateurs. He'd saved for 2 years for this trip, a week-long live-aboard off Guadalupe Island, with a licensed operator known for attracting massive great whites. Mark had brought his most expensive camera setup and told friends this would be the trip that got him published in National Geographic. The operator ran a professional operation with strict safety protocols. On the morning of August 12th, the dive master, a Mexican national named Carlos with 15 years of experience, had been explicit during the briefing. Divers would be secured to the cage with safety tethers clipped to their BCDs. Hands and cameras must remain inside the cage at all times. Mark had listened with visible impatience. When Carlos finished, Mark asked about the possibility of removing the safety tether to allow more freedom of movement for photography. Carlos refused outright. The tethers were non-negotiable. Mark had nodded but said nothing more. The cage was lowered at 11:20 a.m., with Mark and 2 other photographers inside. The water at Guadalupe is among the clearest in the world for shark diving, with visibility often exceeding 100 feet. Within minutes, the first great white appeared, a massive male estimated at 17 feet long. The shark circled in wide, lazy loops. Mark was already positioning himself for shots, his camera pressed against the bars. The other 2 photographers stayed centered, following Carlos's instructions. Mark moved constantly, shifting from corner to corner, his safety tether trailing behind him. The shark made a closer pass, coming within several feet of the cage. Mark got his shots, the strobes firing in rapid succession. The shark continued past and descended slightly. Mark checked his camera's display. They were good, but not great. Not National Geographic quality. He needed something closer, something more dramatic. He reached down and unclipped the safety tether from his BCD. Carlos, monitoring from the surface, saw the tether go slack and immediately signaled for Mark to reattach it. Mark ignored him. He moved to the front of the cage and pushed his camera housing through the bars, extending it outward to eliminate the cage from the frame entirely. To hold the housing steady at that angle, he had to push his right forearm through the bars as well, up to the elbow. The shark was mid-arc when it turned without warning. No change in speed, no telegraphed approach. It simply redirected, and its jaws closed around Mark's forearm before he could pull back. The bite was instantaneous. The shark released and descended the way they do, unhurried, already losing interest. Mark's forearm came back through the bars. The damage was catastrophic. The radius and ulna were fractured, major vessels severed, tissue stripped to the bone from wrist to elbow. He had no meaningful time left. Blood loss at that rate, in cold water, with no tourniquet possible at that location, was unsurvivable, regardless of what happened next. Carlos and the deck crew hauled the cage up immediately. By the time it broke the surface, Mark was unresponsive, the water inside the cage dark with blood. CPR was attempted on deck, but the injuries were unsurvivable. An attempt to bring him to the hospital was made, but Mark was pronounced dead on arrival. The coroner's report listed the cause of death as traumatic injury to the right forearm, with contributing severe blood loss and with exsanguination. As Mark's body was transported back to San Diego, in South African waters, a diving instructor who should have known better was about to allow untrained divers to feed sharks from the cage, a decision that would cost her life when she attempted a rescue. It was May 8, 2018, and the morning sun burned through the mist over the South African coast, where Lisa Harper watched her group of untrained divers lean out of the cage with chunks of bait in their hands. A decision she had authorized despite 15 years of experience telling her it was insane, about to learn that trying to rescue someone from their own stupidity meant becoming a victim herself. Lisa Harper, 41, was a certified diving instructor from Cape Town, South Africa, who had spent her entire adult life in the water. She'd earned her PADI instructor certification at 26, had logged over 2,000 dives, and had been leading shark cage diving tours for the past 8 years. Her reputation in the local diving community was solid, though some colleagues noted she had become increasingly lax about enforcing safety rules in recent years. Years of uneventful dives had eroded her caution, and financial pressure made her reluctant to turn away paying customers or enforce rules that might result in negative reviews. This particular group had booked through a budget tour operator, 5 tourists from Germany who had no diving experience. Lisa had been hired as the instructor for the day, working with a small independent boat operator. During the morning briefing, Lisa had covered the standard safety protocols, but her delivery was rushed. Stay inside the cage. Keep hands and arms inside the bars. Do not attempt to touch or feed the sharks. One of the tourists, a 28-year-old man named Klaus, had asked if they could feed the sharks themselves, saying he'd seen videos online of people doing it. Lisa had initially said no, but Klaus had persisted, offering an extra 200 euros if she'd allow it. Lisa had hesitated, then agreed. The money would cover her rent for the week. She told herself it would be fine, that she'd supervise closely. The cage was lowered at 10:15 a.m., with all 5 tourists inside and Lisa joining them to supervise. The cage was crowded, bodies pressed together. Lisa had brought a bucket of bait, chunks of fish that she distributed to the tourists, instructing them to hold the bait near the bars but not extend their arms outside the cage. The instructions were vague, the boundaries unclear. Within minutes, a great white appeared, a large female estimated at 15 feet long. The shark circled the cage, her movements slow and investigative. The tourists were excited, holding up their bait, waving it to attract the shark's attention. Klaus extended his arm further than the others, his hand and the bait now outside the cage perimeter. Great white sharks hunt primarily by ambush, but they are also opportunistic feeders that will investigate and test potential food sources. When food is presented directly to them, their feeding response is immediate and powerful, with little ability to distinguish between the food and the hand holding it. The shark was mid-pass when she turned toward the bait without warning. Klaus panicked and jerked his hand back, but not fast enough. Her jaws closed around his hand and forearm, the bite instantaneous. She released and descended, the water around Klaus's arm turning dark. Klaus was screaming into his regulator, his mangled arm pulled back through the bars, blood spreading rapidly through the water. The cage erupted. 5 untrained divers in a confined space, all of them panicking simultaneously, bodies colliding, regulators knocked loose, everyone trying to push away from the bars at once. Lisa was already moving toward Klaus, trying to get to him, trying to get herself between him and the bars. In the chaos of bodies and thrashing limbs, she lost her footing entirely, her lower body twisting toward the cage perimeter. Her left leg slipped through the bars to the hip before she could correct it. The shark was still close, drawn by the blood. She was mid-arc when she struck, her jaws closing around Lisa's exposed leg just below the hip. One bite, the same as before, catastrophic, immediate. The shark released and was gone into the water below. Lisa's femoral vessels were severed. She had very little time. The chaos in the cage had not stopped. Tourists still colliding. Nobody with the presence of mind to do anything useful. Lisa's grip on the bars failed as her consciousness went. Her body, already half outside the cage, slipped through and descended slowly, taken by the current before anyone above could respond. The boat crew hauled the cage up at 10:34 a.m. Klaus was still inside, his arm mangled, a tourniquet applied by one of the other tourists who had done enough to keep him alive. The crew radioed for emergency response and began searching for Lisa. Her body was recovered 40 minutes later, found floating 200 yards from the dive site. The coroner's report listed cause of death as traumatic injury to the left leg with rapid exsanguination. Time of death was estimated at less than 3 minutes after the initial bite. As Lisa's colleagues mourned her death, off the coast of False Bay, South Africa, a tourist was about to insist on holding bait near the cage bars herself, against crew advice, determined to get footage that would make her friends jealous, seconds away from discovering that sharks lunge for food with terrifying speed and devastating accuracy. It was January 22nd, 2016, and the morning sun glinted off the choppy waters of False Bay, South Africa, where Hannah Cole insisted on holding bait near the cage bars herself, against crew advice, determined to capture footage that would make her friends back home lose their minds, about to discover that when sharks lunge for food, they don't distinguish between the bait and the hand holding it. Hannah was a 28-year-old tourist from Seattle, Washington, chasing adrenaline and photos on a 3-week trip through South Africa. Her social media accounts were filled with increasingly reckless stunts, each post designed to project fearlessness and adventure. Friends later told investigators that Hannah had a habit of ignoring safety instructions, convinced that warnings were exaggerated for liability purposes. She'd booked with a legal operator running daily trips from Simonstown, a company with a solid safety record. The dive master, a South African national named Peter with 14 years of experience, had given a thorough briefing that morning. Stay inside the cage at all times. Keep hands and arms away from the bars. Do not touch the bait or attempt to feed the sharks. Hannah had nodded along while scrolling through her phone, already planning the shots she wanted. The cage descended into water with moderate visibility, perhaps 30 feet, the surface chop creating shifting patterns of light below. Hannah was in the cage with 3 other tourists. Within 15 minutes, a great white appeared, a large female approximately 14 feet long, her movements deliberate and powerful as she circled. The shark made several passes, each one closer than the last. Hannah was filming with a waterproof camera, tracking the animal's movements. Peter, managing the bait line from the boat, kept the bait at a safe distance from the cage, drawing the shark close enough for photos but maintaining proper separation. Then Hannah surfaced, pulled her regulator out, and shouted up to Peter that she wanted to hold the bait herself. She said it would make for better footage, that she'd seen other operators allow it. Peter refused immediately, explaining that it violated safety protocols and significantly increased risk. Hannah persisted until Peter, wanting to avoid a confrontation that might result in a negative review, made a decision he would regret. He handed her a single piece of bait and told her explicitly to hold it outside the cage bars at arm's length and to drop it immediately if the shark approached too quickly. Hannah submerged and positioned herself at the corner of the cage. She extended her right arm through the bars, holding the bait just beyond the cage perimeter. Her camera was mounted on her left wrist to capture the moment. The great white, still circling, detected the bait immediately and altered course, her movements shifting from lazy exploration to focused intent. The shark began to close the distance. Hannah held the bait steady, her arm fully extended. The shark's approach was deliberate, not an explosive burst, but a focused, accelerating path directly toward the bait. She opened her jaws as she closed in, revealing rows of triangular teeth, and lunged forward, her mouth targeting the bait. Hannah tried to pull her arm back. She was too slow. The shark's jaws closed around the bait, her hand, and a significant portion of her forearm. The teeth punched through the wetsuit, through skin and muscle, severing tendons and crushing bone. The shark's momentum carried her forward, and her massive head collided with the cage bars. Hannah screamed into her regulator. Blood poured from the wound, clouding the water in thick, dark plumes. The shark released her arm and twisted, trying to retreat, but her pectoral fin caught on the bars. She thrashed violently, her tail whipping against the cage structure. Hannah, in shock and panic, tried to pull herself toward the surface, but her right arm was nearly severed at the elbow, hanging by strips of tissue. The major arteries in her forearm had been severed, pumping blood into the water with each heartbeat. The shark freed herself after perhaps 10 seconds of thrashing and disappeared into the murky water. Peter and the deckhand hauled Hannah onto the boat within 30 seconds, her wetsuit shredded, her arm destroyed beyond any hope of surgical repair. They applied a tourniquet above the elbow, but the damage was catastrophic. Hannah had lost consciousness within 90 seconds of the bite, her body going into hypovolemic shock from massive blood loss. The boat's radio crackled with Peter's desperate call to the harbor master, requesting immediate medical evacuation. Hannah Cole was pronounced dead at 10:47 a.m., roughly 12 minutes after the initial bite. The medical examiner's report listed the cause of death as exsanguination due to traumatic amputation of the right forearm with complete severance of major arteries. The dive operator faced no criminal charges, but civil litigation from Hannah's family resulted in an undisclosed settlement. Peter quit the industry entirely, unable to return to the water after watching someone die from a decision he'd enabled. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here.